Playing with Power MTG. Powerful cards, powerful formats. We are back with some more high-powered EDH gameplay. This time we took 4 commanders from the new Lost Caverns of Ixalan precons, powered them up, and now we will see how they do tonight. A big thanks to Wizards of the Coast for sponsoring today's video. If you want to check out Lost Caverns of Ixalan, check out the link in the description below. Now, let's start out by showcasing our fighters this evening. First we have Mike, piloting Carmen, Cruel Sky Marcher. This deck seeks to abuse reanimation effects and use its commander's ability to sacrifice creatures and perform infinite loops. Mike's opening hand contains an Urborg, Tomb of Yawgmoth, Prismatic Vista, Mana Confluence, Demonic Tutor, Animate Dead, Entomb, and his London Mulligan is the City of Brass. Next we have MTG Ambassador Nat, piloting Hakbal of the Surging Soul. This deck seeks to abuse the Explore mechanic to put tons of counters on creatures and swing for massive damage. Nat's opening hand contains a Forest, Island, Mystic Remora, Cyclonic Rift, and her London Mulligans are Doubling Season, Narset's Reversal, and a Growing Rites of Itlamok. After that we have Matt, piloting Pantlaza, Sun Favored. This deck leverages food chain effects and blink effects to maximize the discoverability on its commander. Matt's opening hand contains a Rocco Cabaretti Caterer, Solitude, Bronzebeak Foragers, Worldly Tutor, Bountiful Promenade, Command Tower, and his London Mulligan is a Collector Oof. Finally we have Zeb, piloting Don Andrus, the Renegade. This deck seeks to exile cards from opponents' libraries and leverage them through the commander to overwhelm the board. Zeb's opening hand contains an Opposition Agent, Mana Crypt, Forbidden Orchard, Morphic Pool, Wheel of Fortune, Breach's Eager Pillager, and a Dead Man's Chest. Without further ado, let's kick off this nerdy, noisy, nonsensical noodle. Mike won the Falling Stars challenge and gets to start us off. Mike draws a card for turn and plays an Urborg, Tomb of Yawgmoth. He casts a Soul Ring and passes. Nat draws and plays an Island. She casts a Mystic Remora. She passes. Matt draws, plays a Command Tower, and ends his turn. Zeb draws and plays a Morphic Pool. He casts a Mana Crypt. Remora triggers and Nat draws. Zeb ships the turn. Mike draws and plays a Prismatic Vista. He casts Entomb. Remora triggers and Nat draws. In response, Zeb flashes in an Opposition Agent. In response, Mike cracks his Prismatic Vista, pays a life, and fetches up a snow-covered plains onto the battlefield. Still in response, Matt casts Worldly Tutor. Nat draws from Remora, and Worldly Tutor resolves. Matt fetches up a Bloom Tender onto the top of his library. Then Opposition Agent resolves. Zeb searches Mike's library for a Smothering Tithe into exile. Unfortunately blown out, Mike passes. During her upkeep, Nat pays to keep her Remora. She draws and plays a Yavimaya, Cradle of Growth for turn. She ends her turn. Matt draws and plays a Bountiful Promenade. He casts Bloom Tender and ships the turn to Zeb. During his upkeep, Zeb wins his Mana Crypt flip. He draws and plays a Forbidden Orchard. He taps for Forbidden Orchard, giving Mike a Spirit to help cast Mike's Smothering Tithe from exile. Remora triggers and Nat draws. Zeb passes to Mike. Mike draws, Smothering Tithe triggers, and Zeb creates a treasure. Mike plays a Mana Confluence for turn. He taps Mana Confluence through Yavimaya to help cast his commander, Carmen, Cruel Sky Marcher. With nothing else, Mike passes the turn. During her upkeep, Nat lets her Remora die. She draws and pays for Smothering Tithe. She plays an Island and ships the turn. Matt draws, Tithe triggers, and Zeb creates a treasure. Matt plays a Savannah for turn, then casts Skyclave Apparition. It enters and exiles Smothering Tithe. Matt ends the turn. During his upkeep, Zeb wins his Mana Crypt flip. He draws and plays a Flooded Strand. Zeb taps his mana and cracks a treasure. Carmen triggers and gets a +1/+1 counter, and Mike gains a life. Zeb casts his commander, Don Andrus, the Renegade. He taps Forbidden Orchard, giving Nat a Spirit, and cracks another treasure. Carmen triggers, gets a counter, and Mike gains another life. He casts Breach's Eager Pillager. Zeb passes. Mike draws and moves to combat. He attacks Zeb with Carmen. Carmen triggers and Mike returns Prismatic Vista to the battlefield. Zeb takes 4, and in his second main phase, Mike casts Arcane Signet. He casts Dauntless Dismantler. He plays a Godless Shrine into play tapped and ships the turn to Nat. Nat draws and plays an Island. She casts Surge Spanner. She passes the turn. Matt draws and casts his commander, Pantlaza, Sun Favored. It enters, Matt discovers 4, revealing Dockside Extortionist, casting it. It enters, and Matt creates 3 treasures into play tapped through Dauntless Dismantler. Matt gives the turn to Zeb. During his upkeep, Zeb wins his Mana Crypt flip. He draws and casts Chromox into play tapped, imprinting Displacer Kitten. He casts Dead Man's Chest, enchanting Carmen. He taps Forbidden Orchard, giving Nat a Spirit to help cast Wheel of Fortune. In response, Matt evokes Solitude, exiling Rocco, Cabaretti Caterer. In response, Zeb casts Pact of Negation. Solitude is countered, then Wheel resolves. Everyone discards their hand and draws 7. Next, Zeb pays 2 life to cast Jataxian Probe, targeting Matt. He looks at Matt's hand and draws a card. Zeb moves to combat and attacks Mike with Breaches and Don Andrus. Breaches triggers twice. Zeb creates a tap trigger and Dauntless Dismantler cannot block this turn. Mike blocks Don Andrus with a Spirit and takes the rest. Zeb passes. At the end of Zeb's turn, Mike activates Dauntless Dismantler where X equals 0, sacrificing it, wiping most of the board's treasures and artifacts. Carmen triggers, gets a counter, and Mike gains a life. The turn moves to Mike. Mike draws and plays a Vault of Champions. He casts Boromir, Warden of the Tower. He casts Esper Sentinel. He moves to combat and attacks Matt with Carmen. Carmen triggers and Mike returns Animate Dead from his graveyard to the battlefield. When Animate Dead enters, Mike returns Bronzebeak Foragers from Matt's graveyard to the battlefield. Bronzebeak enters, exiling Surge Spanner, Bloom Tender, and Dawn Andress. Zeb leaves Dawn Andress in exile, and then Matt takes the hit. All through, Mike passes. Nat draws and plays an island. She casts a Soul Ring. She casts her commander, Hakbal of the Surging Soul. She moves to combat and Hakbal triggers. Nat explores, revealing an island, putting it into her hand. She passes the turn. Matt draws and plays an Ancient Tomb. He taps it to help cast Restoration Angel. It enters and flickers Dockside. Dockside enters and Matt creates 6 treasures. Matt ends his turn. During his upkeep, Zeb's Pact of Negation triggers. Zeb cannot pay because his artifacts were destroyed, and Zeb loses the game. The turn moves to Mike. Mike draws and channels Takanuma Abandoned Mire. He mills 3 but has no creatures to return. He plays a Polluted Delta for turn. He moves to combat and in response, Matt casts Swords to Plowshares targeting Carmen. Esper triggers and Mike draws. Carmen is exiled and Mike gains 5 life. In his second main phase, he casts Lurrus of the Dream Den. He casts Dauntless Dismantler from his graveyard through Lurrus. Finish up, Mike gives the turn to Nat. Nat draws and plays an island. She casts Filter Out, paying the Esper tax. In response, Matt casts Red Elemental Blast targeting Filter Out. Esper triggers and Mike draws. Filter Out is countered and Nat moves to combat. Hakbal triggers, Nat explores, revealing Thassa, God of the Sea, leaving it on top, giving Hakbal a 1/1 counter. She passes the turn. Matt draws and plays a Sunbaked Canyon. He taps Ancient Tomb to help cast Turn Timber Symbiosis. Esper triggers and Mike draws. Then Matt looks at the top 7, putting Temur Sabertooth onto the battlefield and the rest on bottom. Unfortunately, due to Dauntless Dismantler, Matt has to pass the turn. At the end of Matt's turn, Mike taps his Mana Confluence to help flash in an Archivist of Ogma. Mike draws and plays a Windswept Teeth. He casts Abdel Adrian, Gorian's Ward. It enters and Mike exiles Arcane Signet and Soul Ring, creating 2 soldiers. Next, Mike casts Dance of the Dead from his graveyard through Lurrus, targeting Matt's Solitude. It enters and targets Temur Sabertooth. In response, Matt activates Temur Sabertooth, bouncing Dockside to his hand. He activates Temur Sabertooth again, bouncing Skyclave Apparition to his hand. Apparition triggers and Mike creates a 4/4 illusion. Then Sabertooth is exiled and Matt gains 4 life. With nothing else, Mike ships the turn. Nat draws and plays a Karn's Bastion. She casts Thassa, God of the Sea. She casts Simic Ascendancy, paying the Esper tax. She moves to combat and Hakbal triggers. Nat explores, revealing a land into her hand. She passes to Matt. Matt draws and plays a Horizon Canopy. He taps it for black through Urborg to help cast a Ranger Captain of Eos. It enters and Matt fetches up a Delighted Halfling into his hand. He taps Sunbaked Canyon through Yavimaya to cast Delighted Halfling. He taps Ancient Tomb to help cast Manglehorn. It enters and destroys Mike's Esper Sentinel. Matt ships the turn. Mike draws and casts Imperial Seal. He fetches up a card onto the top of his library and loses 2 life. He casts Agatha's Soul Cauldron into play tap through Manglehorn. Mike gives the turn to Nat. Nat draws and plays a Forest. She moves to combat and Hakbal triggers. She explores, revealing the Great Henge, leaving it on top, giving Hakbal a counter. Simic Ascendancy triggers and also gets a counter. Nat passes. Matt draws and plays a Windswept Teeth. He sacrifices Ranger Captain, locking out opponents from non-creature spells this turn. He casts Skyclave Apparition. It enters and exiles Dauntless Dismantler. Matt taps Ancient Tomb to help cast Cloudstone Curiel. He taps Horizon Canopy through Yavimaya to help cast Dockside Extortionist. Dockside enters and it and Cloudstone Curio triggers. Matt bounces Delighted Halfling to his hand and creates 5 treasures. Matt presents a loop of bouncing and casting Delighted Halfling and Dockside, creating infinite treasures. In his last iteration, he bounces his commander. He recasts his commander, Pantlaza. It enters, Matt discovers 4, revealing Emil the Blessed, putting it into his hand, then casting it, playing around Boromir's ability. He now uses his infinite treasures to activate Emil, flickering Pantlaza. He does this until he reveals Twin Shot Sniper, putting it into his hand and then casting it. He presents another loop of using Emil to flicker Twin Shot Sniper, dealing 2 damage to an opponent each time it enters. He does this over and over until the table is dead, and Matt wins the game. Ladies and gentlemen, what a fun game tonight. Congrats to Matt on his win. It appeared like Mike was going to take over this game, but Matt's well-timed interaction allowed him to pull off his combo and close it out in 1 turn. A big thanks again to Nat for joining us in tonight's game. You can find her online in the links in the description. Go give her a follow, support her work, and say hey. Well, that about wraps it up for this high-power game. A big thanks again to Wizards of the Coast for sponsoring today's video. If you want to pick up Lost Caverns of Ixalan, be sure to check out the link in the description below. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you next time.